Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to PBSE. This is episode 258. Are you fighting the right war, working within the facts, but not at the cost of connecting with the feelings?
Yeah.
That is a long title.
Well, actually, it's about as long as they always are, but
I
yes.
know, we've gotten into long titles because we want it to be as descriptive. Well, when you got 258 episodes, it does help to have as descriptive a title as possible.
That's true. That's true. It's a very valid point. Very valid point.
Well, this is an interesting episode for us because the last couple of weeks in our Dare to Connect program, we have been taking a pretty novel, unique approach. You know, we're coming up on the end of 2024 and the ringing in of the new year. And with the new year always comes hope for change, New Year's resolutions, fresh start, new beginnings. And you get a lot of people, not just here in the States where we are, but all across the world where we're kind of like flashy racehorses bursting out of the New Year's gate. Gung-ho, sure we're going to change, everything's going to be awesome, and we rush out. And long about, well, it depends on who you are. Sometimes for me in the past, about 1 week to 10 days in, flashy racehorse is exhausted, dead on the track. And then you just resolve yourself to going back into your same old ruts. Sometimes it takes some people, a month or two. If you go to the gym like Steve and I, don't go to the gym in January. It's unbelievably crowded. And then along about February, first or second week of February, it's all sort of down to normal and the regular people are there. Hi, across the gym.
It is true. I hate to admit it, but that you are not wrong.
And so in Dare to Connect, what we thought we'd do, that we are going to talk about extensive strategies, approaches in the neuroscience of change and stuff that really does bring about lasting, real change in people's lives. We're going to do that in January for Dare to Connect. But we thought, you know what? Let's spend the whole month of December getting ready to change. How many people ever talk about getting ready to change before leaping into change? So this whole month of December is helping our D2C people get ready to change. And this topic for this PBSE episode, even though it doesn't allude to, New Year's resolutions or change, as you're listening to this, if you want some great insights about change, you'll see a lot of application here. What we're talking about in this episode is how as individuals, if we're either addicts in recovery, trying to overcome addiction and move forward, or partners who are healing from betrayal trauma, coupleships trying to mend our relationship, it's really easy to get bogged down in the facts, the facts of what's going on, what he's not doing, what I am as an addict, need to break away from. It's almost like checklists and facts, and we get really caught up legitimately, because you do need to be specific about what you want to change and where you want things to go. But one of the things that often gets neglected in that process are the underlying wants and needs and feelings behind why I'm engaging in these facts and these nuances and these, right? What is this really about? I have a client, a coupleship that I was working with some time ago, and I really watched them get caught up in this, about really understanding what they were fighting for. There was severe betrayal in their relationship for 20 plus years.
Mm.
And he was in really good, solid recovery. In fact, he worked recovery pretty hard for a couple of years. But she just she just didn't feel like they were making progress in the coupleship. She didn't feel like her needs were being met. And the way that she felt she needed to address that was that she would not just set boundaries, but she would set lots and lots of restrictions. This is how he viewed them. Restrictions on what he could and couldn't do. Before you don't get to go on social media. Well, because he'd acted out at work. If you're going to go into a work meeting where there are going to be females present, you need to call me, tell me who's going to be there. You know, whether you've had any relations with them in the past, your action plan is just restriction after restriction, boundary after boundary, until he had a pile of boundaries that she had placed on him that were, it was a really high pile. And he started to express this: I feel like my world's getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and I'm a prisoner in this little jail cell about all the things I can't do. And she would say, well, this is what I need to be safe. And so I worked for months and months to help them navigate through that and try to get to this place of, okay, I understand the very legitimate boundaries and restrictions and so forth, but what are the deep core needs, feelings, and wants under all of it? They weren't really good at expressing and sharing that with each other. And so there was just this big pile of doings that were just, it just started to, it got as big as kind of their own private Mount Everest. And I remember one day he was about to engage in a behavior that had been very triggering for her. And right in the midst of just going through the robotic motions, he stopped, he paused, and he thought of her in that moment before he just did it automatically. And it wasn't a relapse or a slip. It was an innocent behavior in their daily lives, but it was one that was very triggering to her from the past. So he stopped, he turned around, walked back in his house, and went and sought her out to tell her that he was pausing before doing this and what were her needs. Well, unbeknownst to him, she was looking through the window to see what he would do outside their house. And she saw him stop and turn and walk back in to seek her out. That was so meaningful to her that she was literally crying, and when she was sharing it with me during their coupleship session. She said, that's the first time in 20 plus years I ever saw you, and listen to this word, consider me. And she'd been saying for a while, you don't consider me. He's like, what does that mean? I don't consider you. And finally he got it. And so because of that event, she finally started to open up and say, here's what's been the underlying deep needs in me putting all these restrictions and boundaries on you the whole time. I wanted to know that you considered me. I was top of mind for you. I was the top of your priority list. You would pause and think of me, your 20 plus year partner, before you engaged in a behavior. I could see that I matter to you. Those were the deep underlying feelings. And yet look at all the piling up of all these facts and nuances and things that they've been going through for many months until they finally got to the deeper level issues. I hope that makes sense to everybody. That's so important. But they didn't feel like they could either, I don't know, they couldn't identify what those things were. It wasn't safe to express them. They didn't know how. All they knew was just to pile on the facts. Right? So that's a story that kind of illustrates this.
Yeah. Well, and this feelings before facts is something that we talk about often on the program, and I think that there, like Mark said, I mean, we both have stories that kind of bring the need for this topic, and it being an appropriate time to be able to mention on the podcast. I think that one of the when clients come to see me in my office or Mark, it's always interesting what brings them in. And when I'm working with couples specifically, when we get past kind of the usual, hey, how you doing? we get to that place where sooner or later one of the members of the coupleship brings up, well, here's the deal. He's either doing this or she's never does this, or this is what's going on and this isn't happening, right? And that's where the discussion oftentimes goes. There's a lead out with this concept of facts, right?
Mhm.
Here are my complaints. These things are happening too much, too little, never at all, whatever it might be. And it is true that facts are relevant as far as they pertain to the coupleship as a whole, but also to, each person's reality in the coupleship. And there is absolutely a place to talk about facts. What is actually going on, what is happening, what is not happening, are commitments being made or kept or not kept or whatever, right? That's all a part of what we do in our offices, Mark and I, every day. But the much more important component to what Mark and I do, we have observed before we get there, which couples again we seem to all be geared towards that less vulnerable space of the facts, is
Yeah.
we have to develop a dialogue or a connection about the feelings behind the facts, um, and what is actually driving either the narrative or the dynamic or whatever the case may be.
And
Um,
yeah, and along with feelings comes what are the authentic, deep felt wants and needs that are under all of that? Because doesn't isn't that what it comes down to? It's like, yeah, you're not doing this, or you always do that, or da 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 da. Where deep down there's something inside me that says this core need of mine's not being met. But the only way I know to express it is with the facts.
yeah, or maybe a more appropriate, and in some cases, I think it is a case of, a lack of skill set, meaning I don't know how to
True,
express those things.
true.
But I think just as guilty a lot of the time, especially for couples, even who've been doing this for a while, even when we do have learned those skill sets, is it's human nature to lead out with facts rather than feelings in emotionally triggering or charged situations because there's less emotional exposure, there's less vulnerability involved.
Well, we could
Um,
ask ourselves, this is true for me for decades, why do I have such a hard time identifying and expressing my authentic needs? And if I go back, it's because I think when I was really young, I tried that and it didn't work. The dysfunctional adults around me either didn't listen or smacked me for daring to speak up, right? Kids should be seen and not heard. Who are you? We adults have big adult problems. We can't be worrying about your little needs. I learned that it wasn't safe and wasn't effective to do so. So what did I
yeah.
learn to do? Use facts, surface symptoms. Those were much easier, much more direct, and quote safer than trying to get down to the really core depth of my real needs, wants, and needs.
Well, and that can also be accompanied by a whole other set of dysfunctional ways of getting needs met, right? That we're not going to talk about today. So, taking on roles within the drama triangle, which we have other
Mm-hmm.
podcasts on, or
Yep.
or things like that.
Yep.
But
Trauma triangle.
it does speak to this idea that if we're going to have effective communication, like and really walk out of it, not just having our needs or our wants met, which is obviously what we're coming together for, but also if we're going to experience the connection that can result from dialoguing about these things, because isn't that the bigger thing? I mean, logistically speaking, we all need to be able to collaborate or function with a partner, right? For roommate purposes or co-parenting purposes or bill paying purposes or whatever. But I think most of you that are listening to this podcast, as much as you're wanting that, that isn't even the real goal. The real goal is to feel like you have a partner. It's to feel like somebody has your back, you're able to have theirs, you're engaged
Yes.
in a common cause, it's the two of us with our backs to each other against the world, right? I mean, I think that's what most people sign up for
And
in a
when you
relationship.
don't feel you have that, and so what do? You default to this facts and surface symptoms and getting all those met. In some ways I call it kind of minutia. I mean, it's necessary to get to the practical, but if that's all we're doing, then look how quick that all piles up. Like the couple I said, one more boundary, one more restrict, one more thing, and pretty soon it was so overwhelming that all those things that had piled up as the nuances and the restrictions and boundaries, that became the main focus and issue when in fact it was not. How many of us find ourselves in that place, that what has become our biggest focus and drains most of our energy away is our surface. They're surface things. And we're not getting anywhere close to the core, to the center place.
Well, it goes back to the title, right? I mean, we find ourselves so often just literally going to war with good intentions, but we end up completely duking it out or putting all of our cards down on the table, so to speak, on not even what we're really looking to achieve.
Yes.
Or on solving, or exclusively on solving maybe the isolated dynamic that's happening, or trying to solve it, as opposed to also keeping just as much, if not more, attention on, okay, what is this a bigger function of?
Yes.
Right. I mean, my wife and I did this for years. We would get, and I'm thinking of one coupleship I'm working with right now where they do this same thing. I mean, we would get into these fights about seemingly small things and spend so much time and energy debating the facts or ideas behind it. And as I look back, what were the things that were really going on behind there? There were two for me. If I could probably sum up 80% of our dysfunctional fights in terms of my needs that I never would have vulnerably expressed, but I would fight for tooth and nail in just random little engagements. It was, I don't feel like I trust my partner, or I don't feel like they trust me. Or the other element is that I am scared, or it was feelings around inadequacy and not feeling like I'm enough in the relationship.
Yeah.
But guess how often we fought about those two topics as opposed to little conversation. I mean, we spent very little time working on the actual issues. And what would it be a fight about? It's a fight to the death about who took out the dogs last, or whose turn is it to, do the laundry, or
Yeah.
no, you're wrong. I did the dishes for the last week and you did it only once. No, I did it 5 times. And we're just going to go the rounds on that all night.
Yeah.
Right.
And everything but what is really going on.
Because it's not the real issue, right? The dishes aren't the real issue. The laundry isn't the real issue. And getting to those issues and the emotions that drive them is where we actually move into an efficient space where we actually get something done. Hey, everybody. It's your PBSC podcast co-host here, Mark and Steve, with a special message to all of you about our revolutionary recovery program for addicts, spouses, and couples, Dare to Connect. Nearly every day, we receive messages from subscribers in the program, couples who are just like you, trying to heal from the devastating effects of sex addiction, pornography addiction, and betrayal trauma. Recently, we actually received an amazing feedback message of hope from a current D2C subscriber, and we wanted to just share it with you quickly. She says, "This is a partner. I am grateful that while you fully address this addiction as a disease and that it takes over the addict's life, you both also fully address the impact their behaviors and their betrayals have had on the partner. Your words and teachings on partner betrayal trauma opened my husband's eyes to his responsibilities and role in helping me heal. He has stepped fully into the gap to lead this process, and we are making such progress. I originally started D2C by myself as my addict partner was not interested in anything I had to say about recovery. He was working recovery through another program, but his work was off limits to me. I had listened to so many of your PBSC podcasts, and I realized that I needed more than I was getting through my own support group. So I signed up for the Dare to Connect 2-week trial."
And then she continues. She says, "One night, my husband looked over my shoulder and asked what I was doing. I shared Dare to Connect with him. He tried it, and he's been fully engaged ever since. Steve and Mark's knowledge and experience speak to him, and he has implemented so many of the things that have been suggested. Thank you for your straight, hard-hitting approach. Keep it up. Our marriage has deepened tremendously, and we are stronger than we've ever been, even while working through the mess that this addiction has made. We're happy, loyal, and incredibly grateful D2Cers." We absolutely love these success stories. It's the reason why we do everything that we do in D2C, to help all of you find lasting recovery and healing. So come on over and join us in the D2C program. You can do it with a free 2-week trial, and you find that at daretoconnectnow.com. Yeah. So as you look to these, personal goals with regard to recovery, healing, mending your relationship, or just changes at large that you're going to do here coming up on a new year, right? We invite you to, what are the honest emotions, the needs, the deep core desires? What's under all this? So if I'm in recovery, right, and I will tell you, I did so-called recovery for a long time with the objective of what? Satisfying the people around me, pleasing the people that were observing me, saving my marriage so my wife wouldn't leave me. All the reasons I engaged in the minutia and the practical stuff of recovery while never really identifying what was deep down in the core of all of it for me. And that's why I wasn't able to be consistent. That's why it didn't last, because all these outside reasons and sources weren't consistent. I needed to be consistent inside of me. So, right. So what's the underlying goal, the want or the need behind all of this? Where was it all leading me to as an individual in my recovery? Why does it matter so much to me? I needed to get in tune with those deep core reasons that became, so recovery today is, is based on me and my authentic self and where I want to get to and what I want to become, regardless of what someone outside of me does or doesn't do, including my wife. It's not about her, it's about me. And it took a long time to get there, right? So all of you in recovery or thinking about recovery, what is it really about for you? And as you discover those authentic wants, needs, desires deep inside you, now, and why it matters so much, now you got to ask, what's going to get in the way? What realistically will get in the way to block me from getting what I really want and really need? And why do those things get in the way? And what am I specifically going to do to move through and beyond them when they come up?
Yeah. I mean, in what we're talking about here, guys, hopefully you're catching our drift on this. I mean, it's embarrassing to say it, but I think back on many conversations that I had with Brittany. I was so defended on my position. If somebody had paused the conversation and just like appeared, like teleported into my room and just said, "What the hell are you trying to accomplish?" I don't know if I could have even told you.
I don't know either. Seriously.
Honestly, I don't even know if I could have even told you like what the actual objective is to prove them wrong. Why? I don't know.
So
Right? Like
caught up in the
I don't know.
minutia, the energy of all this right now. I don't know what its deep core purpose even is or was, or even if there
Sure.
was one.
Well, and you know, we use the term at the beginning of this podcast, the title, "Are you fighting the right war?" I mean, that's where that fog of
Mhm.
war concept comes in for those who've never heard that term before, right? It's a term used in real fighting, like in real battles, where because of confusion, whether it's because you can't see correctly or because your senses become overwhelmed or there's too much happening or it's sensory overload or whatever, what happens? Soldiers become jaded or disoriented on what they're even doing in the moment,
Yes.
right? Sometimes we even shoot our own allies or attack our own allies as a part of that, right? We get so turned around in the middle or in the thick of it that we're not even, and that happens emotionally as well all the time.
Yes.
And that is another reason why connecting with the emotional side of this is so important, because in a coupleship dynamic or just even in people dynamics, we can become so defended on the facts that I mean, that's a rule for this, right? If I cannot at any time during a disagreement with my partner, if I cannot at any time clearly convey the why behind this, that fight should stop immediately.
I agree.
If one or both of us can't even convey what we're what we're duking it out over, however
Yeah.
healthily, we need to pause and go back and reflect before we even continue.
Yeah. So I can come back and
Right?
say, here, now as I really think deeply about it and I've done my work, here's what I'm really asking for from you. Here's what I actually need in all of this.
And
But how
even
often do
better,
we
these
do
things
that?
that I was fighting for, here's what I was trying to achieve by
Here's what I,
asking for
yep.
this.
Here's what I was trying to get to.
Right? Me, because that's where Brittany and I would get eventually after going the rounds for God knows how long, right? Eventually, Steve would finally emotionally sober up and be like, "Look, I'm sorry we fought about the dishes for 6 days in a row. I think I just felt like I wasn't enough of a partner to you. To
Ah.
which Brittany would finally be able to start lowering her guard and be able to say, I appreciate that. And then she'd share her insight. And it's like, well, this is great that we got here, but how much ammunition did we expend?
Oh my gosh, right?
How many wounds did both of us take? How many blows did the relationship have to endure to get to that point?
Yeah, or me after 3 solid weeks of being stoic and withdrawn and isolated and mopey and moody and wallowing, finally coming to my wife and saying, you know what? This has all been about me being scared to absolute death that you're going to leave me, that we're not going to make it, that
Yeah.
I'm not enough for you. And in my absolute terrorized feelings, I just shut down entirely because I couldn't deal with it.
Yep.
Mark said it. Dang, this sure would have been a nice, 3 weeks ago to have said that right out of the gate. Right.
So true. But how often do we do that, right? How often do we do that? How often do we find ourselves in that place? I mean, the answer is too often. So, well, we better press on because you can tell we're
Yeah,
sort of
we
we're sort
are.
of passionate about this, and
Well,
we're
and,
gonna be
and the
here all day.
same thing we just said about addicts in recovery. We invite all of you partners who are in betrayal trauma healing to ask yourselves the same questions. What am I trying to get to here? What are my underlying deep core authentic wants and needs? Who am I doing this for?
Yeah.
What's going to get in my way? What is getting in my way right now? How specifically can I healthily navigate through those things? Just as addicts have individual recovery plans and reasons, all of you partners have individual healing and
Yeah.
all that goes along with that.
Well, and before you even engage with your partner, here's kind of a litmus test. A couple of questions we wanted to throw out to you if you're considering bringing up something effectively with a partner. So before I even go to my partner who express needs or wants, I need to be able to answer the following questions. First of all, what role would I see my partner playing in these things?
Mm,
Right? If I don't even have an idea, so often we just set out impulsively on, okay, well, I need my partner's help. Well, how? How do you need their help? How are you planning to involve them? How would you like to see them engage? If you don't know, why would we expect them to know? But we do that all the time as addicts and
well,
partners in this process.
and we fall into the trap. If I have to tell you what I need or expect for you to do, then
You don't really care.
you don't love me because you should have known.
Yeah, whoever maybe it was Shakespeare, I don't know. Whoever going back into the stories of romance over the eons, whoever linked the idea of mind reading with really caring about another person ought to be drug out and shot. It's like it is the stupidest link in all of amorousness to think that if my partner really loves me, they're going to be able to read my mind.
I know.
It's just nonsense. It's
So
such
prevalent.
nonsense, right?
But
I need to be able to clearly convey and speak my needs to my person.
well, yeah, but if I assume if they love me, they'd know, then I get to avoid that whole process that you just said.
Of course. Instead, we can just play emotional chess for the next 3 weeks, like you said, which is so much funner. So that's litmus test number one, right? Number two, what emotions are driving these needs or wants for me? Okay,
Mm.
these are the things that I'm asking. Have I really done the work to figure out why?
Hmm.
I'm wanting my wife to reach out to me in empathy. Why? Is that even her job? I'm working with a coupleship right now. I kid you not. I just got an email not 5 minutes before we started today where I'm working a partner wrote me a message saying that she's discouraged because she feels like her husband's falling back into old patterns of what? He's looking to her or shifting to her things that he can't or that she can't change, specifically around his self-regard or his self-image or his self-worth.
Mm.
And I don't know that he even knows that he's doing it consciously because it's been so automatic for him in the past. But we're going to be talking about it this week in our session because she already
Hmm.
just mentioned in this email because here we are, right? Dealing he is probably going to just old defaults and he's not even taking the time to ask that question, right? Where like what is the purpose of this? Where is what's the end game here, right? Like what are the actual needs for me behind this? Have I even considered that? Or am I just looking to my partner? I mean, I hate to say it, but it's no secret. We addicts, we in some cases have some emotional growing up to do. Am I just looking for my partner to make it all better for me?
Mm-hmm.
or make it better for us? Where's my role in
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Well, and
Um,
as you start to look at these things, you're going to find naturally that old habits, your survival brain, all kinds of baggage are going to try to block you from taking this healthy, vulnerable, proactive, expressing approach. And you're going to need to step back to assess that and say, okay, what's operating in the room right now that's interfering with my ability to convey my wants and needs to my partner, or interfere with my ability to truly hear and connect with what they are expressing right now. Where are all those barriers? Why does this always fall apart? Why do I always go stoic? Why do I always end up angry? Why, right? Fill in the blank. What is all that about?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you can tell we're just a little bit passionate about this, guys. We appreciate you bearing with us. Well, as we wrap this up, right, in a coupleship, how do we discuss facts but not at the cost of the feelings component? So let's talk about the coupleship dynamic.
Mm.
Okay. So some rules to consider as you're sitting down to do this. First, we need to go into discussions intelligently, meaning that we need to do what we talk about on this podcast all the time. There needs to be a set of established boundaries for the discussion, specifically around sharing, listening, and who will talk and when.
Yes.
Now, those boundaries should include the usual boundaries that we talk about, but I'm going to link it to the second bullet point here that I've got. The need that we need to make a commitment that we're going to lead with our feelings and with our weaknesses in this discussion. Okay, this concept of leading with your weaknesses is something you'll find in any well-established 12-step fellowship, and it's for very good reasons. We create a culture of vulnerability when we take ownership of what we're bringing to the table that may be less than stellar in this discussion. We're going to lead out with the things that we find more averse or that less desirable about ourselves. We're putting ourselves out there through an attitude of saying, I'm doing my best to try to recognize where I'm falling short or may fall short in this discussion. And not only, I think, does that create an attitude of vulnerability, but it also helps to formulate the boundaries around that specific discussion because not every boundary is helpful for every discussion. I'll give you an example. My wife and I, there are certain topics, specifically her parents, where historically, especially in the early days, we had to we had to engage on that topic with a whole different set of boundaries from normal dialogue. The discussion and the emotions around it for me had become so charged, and frankly for Brittany, because she felt so much pressure because of it, that things would go toxic on a dime.
Mm.
And so the way we would dialogue, I mean, one example was for a while, we didn't even tackle that unless we were in my therapist's office. That was the first thing that happened.
Yeah.
For a while there, this is not even a topic for discussion at home. And when it became a topic for discussion at home, that came with its own set of boundaries.
Now
And so
notice what Steve didn't say. Well, because here's what I would come back with, Steve. Well, since that's such a difficult topic and goes volatile so quickly, then that topic's entirely off the table, never to be discussed ever. Notice Steve didn't say that. He just said the environment, the boundaries, the setting for which we are going to do that needs to be carefully considered. Not that we use all of that as an excuse to bury it down deeply so that it just keeps popping up its ugly little head in all these other ways that aren't related. No, it
no,
is
yeah.
discussed, but how you do it is everything, right?
Well, and if we need to talk about it, right? I mean, it kind of leads into the next bullet point that we had down, right? Most of you have heard the term keeping your cards close to the vest. It's so interesting how oftentimes we sit down to have vulnerable discussions that everybody wants to treat it like it's a game of blackjack or poker.
Yeah, you get your cards way in here so nobody can see them.
Yeah, here,
Yeah.
partner, I want to work out a vulnerable dialogue with you, but we're gonna play 3D, advanced chess to try to figure it out. No, the phrase needs to be I keep my cards as far away from my vest as I safely can.
As I safely can.
And if there are cards that I can't fully expose to you, I am transparent about what area those lie in and why.
Yes.
Here are things that I don't know that I could talk to you about right now specifically. Here are the needs behind them, and I'm open to talking to you about how we might be able to move towards that direction, but I can't talk. I don't feel safe to talk about those things right
But
now.
do you see how that was still vulnerable? It was still authentic and expressive. It got it out onto the table, but it did so in a boundaried communicating way. But we don't typically do it. For most of us, it's an all or nothing proposition.
Yes.
Yeah, you either share it or you don't, period. End of story.
Yeah. Well, and last but not least, guys, we then need to be able to walk our partner through the connection of how meeting a given need or want will impact us and or the relationship in a positive way, factually and emotionally. Oftentimes we will just, again, we'll lead out with the needs or the wants, and we will kind of, again, as a way to, I think, avoid emotional vulnerability, we will say, well, here they are. Okay. Well, what about the why? Hey, do you love me? Well, this is what I need then. There you go. I mean, I guess you could go there, but think how much the discussion becomes enhanced if you're able to vulnerably walk your partner through, if you're able to do these things, or if you can authentically do this, I can tell you I think it's going to have this impact on me and will be helpful for me in X, Y, and Z in terms of showing up here as well. Because I
See,
know this is something else we're trying to work on.
That's the feelings behind the facts. Here are my needs and wants, the facts. But let me see, here's where we get into intimacy. I'm going to let you see into me, not just by delivering a checklist of needs and wants to you, but I'm going to tell you why they mean so much to me and how much it would mean to me and how it would impact my life and our relationship if you found that you would choose to do these things. Here's the impact it would have. I'm going to let you see into the deepest parts of me and why this is so important. How much more motivated am I going to be as a partner when my partner dares to be that vulnerable? So as I look at her and go, wow, me doing that means that to you? Wow, I never knew.
Yeah.
That's going to really play a role as I go forward and look to do that now. Thank you. Right?
Yeah.
The feelings,
Absolutely.
the meaning, the whys, the needs under the facts. So critical.
For sure. Well, guys, we appreciate you letting us, as always, into your hearts and homes another week. We so appreciate all of you who listen and tune in every week. Right now, as of this was being recorded during the holidays, and we always have a bit of a lull in question submissions during the holidays. So if you're listening to this, well, regardless of when you're listening to this, but especially now, we currently don't have a waiting list on questions. So we would love to have you send us questions. If you've got things that you want to address or tackle, be they surrounding navigating the holidays in betrayal and addiction recovery or something completely unrelated, you can, if you go to pbsepodcast.com, that will actually take you to our Dare to Connect website for our paid subscription program for addict spouses and couples. But up at the top is a button you can just click that takes you to the PBSE podcast site, where at the bottom you can submit questions to us. And as always, if you like what you hear on the podcast, you will love what you hear in Dare to Connect. We are offering a 2-week free trial right now for that. If you go to DD or daretoconnectnow.com, we can connect you up there. We're talking about, guys, literally, let's see, nearly 10 hours of content every week that's live and interactive, along with weeks of past recorded sessions available on demand and for download, in addition to an ever-growing library of D2C advanced courses in our D2C Academy, as well as basic tutorial videos in our D2C Vault. Frankly, we have more content for you on the subjects of addiction, betrayal trauma, recovery, healing, and anything in between than you could ever possibly consume. Please come join us, and you can check that out at daretoconnectnow.com.
Yeah, sounds good. Hey, thanks for being with us, and we'll pick things up in our next episode.
Have a great week, guys.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.